Hello and welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast, Series 3. Last year, we spoke to SDRs, BDRs and people earlier on in their sales careers about their journeys, tips and why people should get into the industry. This year, we'll be speaking with sales and business leaders about their journeys, how they've made their success and their insights into sales as an industry, especially what needs to be done to change the perception of sales. I'm Lizzie.
I'm Kyle, and still for far too long, people have just been falling into sales. Through this podcast, and by having conversations with industry leaders, we're looking to continue to change the perception of sales and make it a career of choice.
On this episode, we're joined by David Bentham, Director of Sales Development at Cognism, which is a sales and marketing acceleration platform helping sales teams to connect with their customers. We talk through his journey from travelling Australia, doing door-to-door straight after university, to now leading the sales development function of a SaaS business, and specifically what advice he would give to people who want to follow down the same journey. We also hear about his take on the debate about cold calling apparently being dead, his top tips for cold calling, as well as how he's built his online presence. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to this episode of the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by David Bentham. David, thank you for joining us.
Not a problem at all. Really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure is all ours, David. And to kick things off then, please, just for the listeners' benefit really, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and the company that you currently work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's David Bentham. I am the Director of Sales Development at Cognism. I've been at Cognism since 2018, and my role is to manage the sales development function, which is the team that kind of builds pipeline, does a lot of the top of funnel activity for the sales organization. And Cognism is a sales and marketing acceleration platform. So we are salespeople that sell to salespeople.
Which is always a very, very fun thing to do, isn't it? Selling to people that know all the tricks of the trade. But no, thanks for the introduction there, David. And we're going to be unpacking a lot about sales development throughout the conversation. But in this particular series, speaking with more senior sales leaders, we always like to kind of go back to the beginning and the start of the sales journey, really. So keen to hear and understand how and why did you get into the sales industry in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So my story, I think, is actually pretty typical, that I fell into sales. As a kid, I always knew that I wanted to make lots of money. I was very money motivated, and I was always pretty good at maths. So I figured that I'd just become a banker because I heard that they make loads of money. And then, so I did an economics degree, and then post-university, I don't think I was quite ready for work. So I chased a girl to Australia to do some backpacking. Unfortunately, it didn't go very well with the girl. But I was like, look, I'm out here now, so I'll try and make the most of it. And I went on Gumtree to look for jobs, and there was lots of cafe jobs. That I didn't, but I never really worked in hospitality or anything before that. And then there was this one job that said, you can make, are you a backpacker? Do you want to make $2,000 a week? If so, come to this address tomorrow. So I did. And it turns out it was a commission-only door-to-door sales job. And yeah, I kind of that was how my sales career kick-started.
Nice, love that story, and particularly the advert on Gumtree where it was a load of questions, and you were just like, yes, I'll be there at the address.
Yeah.
What was it like then, starting your career sales career in a commission-only sales job?
Yeah, so personally, I loved it. I was staying with a family friend at the time, and that everybody told me not to do it. But I love for me, it was the competition of it all and the kind of gamification. I turned up to work every day, and I knew that if I didn't make a sale, I didn't make any money, which just drove me. And I get a lot of So I mean, there's two things that fulfill me. Number one, it's winning, because I'm so competitive. So I love I love beating people and beating my colleagues and on a day and competing with them on a daily basis. But I think the second thing is just I love the days. I think for some people it's hard, but I absolutely love the days where I've just worked my ass off. I don't know whether I can say ass, but anyway, I've said it. Yeah, I love those days where I get home and I'm exhausted because I've feel like I've just been super productive. So I love packing my days with work and stuff to do, and yeah, certainly like I, I suppose I'd worked in kind of factories and done odd jobs before that through university and school, and when I was working there, you could turn up on a day and not really turn up. But I'd always get home feeling unfulfilled. Whereas this one, if I didn't turn up, then I wouldn't make any money, and then and I, so there was no choice. I had to make the most of every single day, and that for me gave me a lot of fulfillment.
Yeah, we'll probably come on to this shortly as well, but we do tend to find that people that have had that commission only, door-to-door, face-to-face, direct sales experience do transition and turn into really good SDRs for a lot of the reasons there that you mentioned about what you enjoyed about the role. But as an Englishman knocking on Australian people's doors, selling, it was HelloFresh, wasn't it? Food boxes, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah, food delivery. Yeah, potatoes.
What was
I
it?
always say potatoes.
Flogging potatoes. What was it like being an Englishman knocking on Australians people's doors when they're not
Uh,
expecting it?
that's fine. Yeah, it was. I did it. I ended up doing it for a bit in London, and that was way worse than knocking on Australia's
Really?
doors in Australia for sure. Yeah. There's lots of stereotypes, but most of them are true in terms of how friendly Australians are. And the truth is it all came down to a lot of the horror stories that you would hear from doing that kind of work. They do exist, but it really comes down to the individual. I got sworn at twice in my whole time. I was knocking on doors for 3 years, and I got sworn at twice. And one of those was because, unfortunately, I knocked on the door of a lady who had literally just lost her job, which was incredible. That's just bad timing. I felt very sorry for her, and I didn't. There's nothing. I would also swear in that situation. And the second one, I kind of maybe. In the younger version, more immature version of me, maybe had a little bit of an argument with a particular person who was very upset about the fact that I was in the area. But both that was really avoidable. And if I just kind of stepped down and been nicer, then I probably wouldn't have created that. So overall. My experience was just really nice. People were really friendly. The truth is as long as if you implement, I was really big on training and kind of like making sure that I was listening to my manager's advice and kind of always looking for feedback on the stuff that I was doing. And as long as I followed, as long as I followed the advice and was constantly looking to improve, then the quality of my conversations was just increasing. And actually, I'd say, I got sworn at twice in my 3 years, but I probably was invited into people's homes maybe 2-3 times a day. Over the course of those 3 years, I had family. I had one family that asked me to look after their kids for a bit while they popped out and things like that. So very very much like there are obviously horror stories, but for the best part, it was a fantastic. It was fantastic to kind of learn this skill where I was able to meet complete strangers in their own homes or at their own homes, and within 10 minutes, kind of diffuse and build the rapport necessary that actually they were so welcoming that they would invite me into their own homes.
Probably a lot of SDRs listening to this that maybe get sworn at on the phone a lot more times than maybe twice in 3 years that you mentioned as well. But one thing I would say, I think it's probably harder for someone to be rude to you in person at the door than maybe it is on the phone anyway. It's probably a bit of a common misconception with door-to-door face-to-face sales. But what would you say to that?
I'm not so sure from my experience. I think selling B2C and door to door is people are very honest and blunt and can be very rude. So I would say that selling B2B as an SDR is a walk in the park generally. I suppose when you call people B2B, even when you're calling them, they're still representing their company.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually if you get people that are a bit more blunt, or if you get people that are a bit more rude, it's generally just them being blunt, and kind of getting you off the phone very quickly. But it's from my experience doing this for 4 years now, I think I've really not heard many stories of kind of people being sworn out. There's always the odd one, but generally speaking, it's you've been hung up on or something along those lines. So yeah, I think it's generally not as bad as you think.
There we go, guys. Good for a lot of aspiring salespeople listening to this to hear anyway. And this is a question we just like to ask, because there sometimes can be some funny stories or anecdotes to share. But in Australia, can you remember the first ever sale that you secured?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, it was with a student, and I think they'd already heard about HelloFresh, as far as I remember. And to put it in perspective for the listeners, I used to have to take, maybe I'm showing my age here, I can't believe I'm saying that, but I feel like I'm getting older. I used to have to take the orders on pen and paper, including their credit card details. I literally had to write their credit card details on a pad that I was carrying around. So when you're thinking about, if you're a salesperson thinking about trust and rapport, like imagine like what we had to do. And I got out this pad and paper, and I was so nervous. It was kind of like a nervous excitement, right? They'd said yes. It was a nervous excitement, and I was so nervous and excited that my hand was like shaking. And so this really lovely lady, and I would love to know like who she is and kind of, I don't know, sort something out for her, because it genuinely changed my life. She was like, "Do you want me to help you out with that?" And took the pen and the pad and order form like herself and filled it out for me. So she must have seen how nervous I was, and filled it out. But yeah, it was an amazing moment. And from there, like, once you can do it once, like, you can do it a million times over. And very fortunately, I mean, I always say it's more luck than judgment, your first one, your first sale, generally speaking. And very fortunately, I got that very, very early on, literally on my first day. So the morning of my first day, so kind of everything kicked off from there.
What a way to start. And I actually quite like the honesty there as well. And I don't think it's a shame to say you were nervous or there was vulnerability when you first start a sales job. I think that's something that everyone experiences. And just as well that you had someone that was nice enough to fill out their details for you on the piece of paper. It doesn't get much better than that.
It's crazy. Yeah,
I love that. Great story. Everyone's always got a story for the first sale as well, which is why it's a good point to ask. And then can you now then talk about the transition really from door-to-door direct sales into tech sales as an SDR, which is where we started in London at Cognism. So I guess please share with just what the thought process and the reasoning was behind making that transition from HelloFresh to the route you got at Cognism.
Yeah, so I decided to come back from Australia. I miss my friends and family and football. And I actually initially started or kind of worked for my old boss at HelloFresh. He was starting his own door-to-door agency here in London. So I kind of helped. I was there on day one of that and helped kick that off. And I maybe did about 6 months with him. Which was great because it was a really nice way of me kind of returning back to the UK, and I literally, I got off the plane and the next day started work. So that was very good. But in the end, I think that I very quickly realised that, and perhaps the reality of being back in the UK and kind of being surrounded by my peers again, I realised that I kind of wanted to get into something that was going to be more of a career for myself, and as much as I really value door-to-door sales and everything that goes with it, I really didn't think that was going to be my career. So yeah, I was looking around and kind of figured out pretty quickly that realistically, if I took my sales skills and applied it to the world of B2B instead of B2C, I was going to make a lot more money, right? I heard about the deal sizes, and I was still quite naive to it. I didn't do much research. I was just like, well, surely I'll make more money, and switched over. And that's honestly the truth. I then started applying for graduate jobs. Went to a bunch of recruitment agencies, and they all mentioned the fact that there was this role of an SDR that was available, and I think obviously because of my experience in Australia, I was offered a lot of those interviews and jobs pretty quickly, and fortunately for me, in my situation, I was able to go to so many different interviews. And get offered like most of them, and so it's really kind of like my place to pick. And again, very naively, I didn't look at the things that I now know you should, which is things like the culture of the company and like where the company's going. I didn't ask any of these questions, but Cognism mentioned that there was a potential manager role available, and that's kind of what I did a lot of in the end in Australia, and really enjoyed. So they kind of opened that door that there might be a manager role available pretty quickly, and so I was just like, yep, let's do this, and the rest is kind of history.
Nice, and we'll come on to that in a second as well, because I believe you were an SDR for 3 months before kind of transitioning and moving into the manager role, which is incredibly quick progression. I know you've done a bit of it before. There must be as well a lot of people doing door-to-door sales, particularly the climate and the weather is certainly much better in Australia than the UK as well, particularly the way it's been at the moment. But coming on to that, how did you find the transition from door-to-door, commission only, to a role that was kind of purely phone and office-based, being an SDR?
Yeah, so a lot of it's the same. To be honest, the principles are the same, right? The more the more doors I knocked, the more sales I got in door-to-door, the more calls I made, the more demos I booked in the world of SDRing. I'd say the biggest difference is selling face-to-face. Selling face-to-face, it's a lot easier to read people's body language and understand like where their headspace is, because you're obviously hearing what they're saying and the tone that they're saying things in, but you can be reactive to the way that they're moving, and even the really subtle movements. Like, for example, they might have their arms crossed at the start of the conversation, and then you say something and they kind of put their hands down, and then you've got them, right? That it's those kind of subtle body language signals that can make a big difference and make it a lot easier to sell in that respect. And then also so much of it came down to rapport, I think, with B2C sales and door-to-door. Whereas when you're selling business to business, I think a lot of the buying process is a lot more rational and based off of I suppose less of an impulse. And so you have to really be crystal clear on the value that the product is bringing. That's not to say you don't need to be crystal clear doing door-to-door, but I suppose when the product that I'm selling is, £30 versus, potentially £100,000, I think buyers are way more willing to kind of purchase based off of an impulse situation. So, and I think also people within businesses are targeted much more often and have way more used to having those conversations with sellers than perhaps B2C. I can't speak for everyone, but I don't know how many times someone's knocked on your guys' doors in the past couple of years. Probably like once or twice, maybe mostly for charity. So these buyers in businesses are way more used to the process. We obviously sell to salespeople as well, so they're very, very used to the process, and they know all the tricks or they know all the sales theory that goes with it. And so, yeah, you have to kind of be way more, I suppose, professional, but also just create like a really rational buying process as opposed to building these impulse buy situations.
Cool. I think that's a good summary and a good assessment. An interesting point you mentioned about the knocking on people's doors. Because I've lived in this house for 3 years. I don't think there's been one sales door knock or someone trying to sell anything in the time that I've lived here. It's maybe been out when they're all knocking in the day potentially. Which is it. You see a lot of people that work in the industry but never been on the receiving end. I quite like to see it be going about it. But going on the journey
It's probably something about your driveway, Kyle. If you
well,
judge a house based on the driveway. Maybe that's the problem.
Maybe I need to check it out. We've cleaned it up now. It's not too bad. It should be inviting. But moving into the journey then from kind of Cognism and transitioning into a management role. Again, I know you've done management in previous roles and door to door, but 3 months as an SDR to then an SDR manager, it's an incredibly quick time, isn't it? And short, impressive as well. How did you find that short transition and step from SDR for 3 months into now I'm managing, mentoring, and helping other people in the job?
Yeah, so I suppose contextually, of my 3 years doing door to door, I actually started managing people maybe a month into doing door to door, and part of that is because I had a driving license, so I could drive the bus. I'd essentially done about 3 years worth of management by the time I moved. To Cognism. So the deal that we made, or the deal that I made with Cognism, is that I would become the manager if I proved myself over those first 3 months. So coming in, I just knew that I needed to prove myself. However, I would say there has been some difficulties with moving up so fast. I think I would say I could apply a lot of the basic principles, like a lot of things were similar, but I have been, and I still am to a certain extent chasing my tail in terms of, I suppose I'm chasing other people in the sense that I think I'd be much more. I think I'd be even better at my role if I'd done 2 years of pure SDRing myself, because I'd have a lot more. I'd have a lot more things that I could work with the team on, a lot more experiences that they can directly associate with. A lot of my stories, the team joke all the time about a lot of my stories being door-to-door related, and although relevant, I think it'd be even easier if I'd spent longer in the SDR role. So although it was great, and I'm really pleased, and we've done really well regardless. I think my message is don't rush these things necessarily. It's good to become absolute experts in your field before moving into a management role.
Yeah. Cool. I think it's a good thing that you probably had those 3 months as well for you as well, but also for other people in the team, rather than coming in on day one and managing other people. So I certainly think it was a good thing by the sounds of it.
Yeah, 100%. It was a great deal, and I'm really appreciative that they did it, because I would have, my arrogance and ignorance would have definitely said that I could just do the management role straight away. But I came in, I proved myself, and I was fortunate that I hit target every month for those 3 months. I knew that's what I needed to do, and hopefully, and you'll have to ask them. They're all still working at Cognism now, but the peers that I had at the time and the team that I inherited, they I hope I gained their respect, that I did know what I was doing and I could add a lot of value to them. So I think without doing that 3 months, I would never have been able to do the job. And not dropping it in it, I've actually heard stories of managers that come in and they've perhaps sold a different tool or product before moving into sales management roles, and then they move into management role, and then they struggle, and then they try actually sell the product that they're trying to teach people to sell, and they just can't do it, and that's a complete horror story. So I think any new managers coming in, if I was to take another job right now, I would 100% probably spend the first month, maybe longer, just kind of doing the, really experiencing the role of the sellers in my team as well, to gain that experience, so that you can. I think you become a better coach if you do that.
Yeah, well, you can just understand the shoes that you imagine are walking in as well. If you can get on for that first month, so no, I think it's a fair piece of advice. And when you kind of inherit a team, how big was the team size at that particular point?
5. Yeah, it was
And it's
five SDRs.
since gone to 75 reps from 2 million ARR to 30 million ARR,
Yeah,
I believe, in that
yeah,
time.
yeah. So we have 75 SDRs globally now at Cognism, and then we've just broken 40 odd million ARR. I think, yeah, my LinkedIn's slightly out of date, but it's about 40 million. I think we were at 1.8 when I started. Can't really remember.
Yeah. Just the
Pretty
10 million
crazy.
out, but at least it's out in the right direction anyway. So again, like we're keen to explore people's journeys on this, but that's some journey really in the space of 4 years from getting on the phone to now a director level position and helping a business grow headcount, but also revenue at the same time. So what have you kind of learned, and what's the journey been like for you?
What have I mean, I've learned a ton. Journey's been tough but really fun. I think that I think you've got to, yeah, it's a cliche, but I think you've got to do stuff that you find fun. I think it's so much more motivating. And look, I've made like a bunch of mistakes. I think one of the things that I had to do was the cultural element was very different. So when I was selling door to door in Oz, it was a bunch of backpackers. You can imagine the kind of work atmosphere that was there, but also the culture that was being driven, and I knew was a very competitive, verging on toxic. It was like that kind of, Wolf of Wall Street type sales room, essentially. So I'm moving to Cognism. I feel very blessed that I was introduced to a different type of sales culture, which was all about, working as a team, and it was being competitive with yourself instead of other people, and things like that. So that was a massive thing that I learned, that you can run a sales team in that way, and you don't have to do it in that antiquated, toxic competitiveness kind of way. But yeah, no, we just, I think the key thing that I've done, I think, is just make sure that I'm always open to new ideas, and constantly trying to learn, but also like have a bunch of fun along the way, and not take everything too seriously all the time. And hopefully that reflects in just the overall mood of the team, and therefore the motivation of the team, and ultimately the results in the team as well. It's a very open-ended question, Carl. I'm not sure. There's so many things I could say.
Yeah, no, we are relatively limited on time, unfortunately, with the podcast, but I think there's some good stuff in there. And let's say there's another SDR manager that's listening to this, and they've got goals and ambitions to get to director of SDR, or even grow their team, to a similar trajectory than you've done. What would be then, just to simplify it, the one piece of advice that you would give to them to looking to do the same?
Yeah, so you need to think about not just your team, but aligning your team to the overall company objectives, and thinking about essentially what, so I'm assuming most SDR managers would be rolling up to some kind of VP of sales or higher. And you need to think about their objectives, what they want to see, and just make sure you're actually focused on that. Today, my target is actually the target of I'm on the revenue target of the business, and not the target of the SDRs, which is we do like a kind of a blend of like meetings attended and revenue that they source, but mostly meetings attended. And that very literally has completely aligned me to the company objectives, and I'm making overall strategy decisions based off of that. So I think one mistake I made when I first started was I was very, very focused on just getting the SDRs to their number no matter what. And although that was great and kept the team happy, and is important in that sense, I didn't see I didn't see real growth in the number until I started thinking, okay, how can I actually change the SDR's targets, or change what the SDRs are doing so that we're focused more on the revenue side. So yeah, I think that would be my number one piece of advice is like, I don't know what every SDR manager's target is, but try and just think about what the business objectives are and how you take a step back and think about how your team can help with that objective. And because if you are, then your company should continue to invest in your organization and grow it accordingly.
Yeah. So I guess it's not just thinking about your own target, like meetings booked or the team's performance, but actually thinking about other departments, other areas, other people higher up in the business, and understanding what they need to achieve and how you're kind of support as well. I think that's a really good point. And going into the scaling, 'cause I know scaling is something that you kind of talk about quite a lot, post about a lot, scaling an outbound team. One of the big pains, as we know as recruiters, but I'm sure you've experienced as well, is recruitment and talent, and from growing a team from 5 to 75 in that short period of time. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of SDRs over the years. What are some of the traits or characteristics from what you've seen that make a top performing salesperson or SDR?
Yeah, so what we look for is firstly high achievement in general, so or a track record of high achievement. So I don't really care what it's in, but I think it says a lot about that person if they've strived to be the best at something. So, for example, I've had really talented individuals that have become the president of the lacrosse team at university. That does say something about them, that they've pushed themselves through. There's probably 100 people in the lacrosse team at the university, and they've pushed themselves right the way through. Or it could be that they've to be honest, I don't really mind. Like, they could be the world's champion tiddlywink player. I always say they could be, it really doesn't matter. But I think you do have to have a certain mentality to want to push it all the way through. So that's massive. I think accountability is really important as well. A big red flag for me is if I'm in interviews and then we ask about performance at previous companies and there's any kind of blame associated with the previous company. I don't really like to hear it. It usually says something about the character, is that, and I think top performers generally, they look inwardly first before they start thinking about kind of what external factors might be affecting them. And that's really, really important to me as well. And then just, curiosity, I think is so key with sales and sales development. I think you've just, I want people to come to interviews and ask a bunch of questions about the company, about just anything that they're interested in. I don't want it to be the cliche ones that they've Googled the night before. I want it to be the ones that they're genuinely interested in. And because that, again, is going to tell me a lot about like the attitude that they'll go into the job with.
Nice. No, appreciate you going through that with us and the listeners, and obviously a few good tips there for anyone, I suppose, looking to get into sales. Firstly, a few tips to hold into the interview process, but also SDRs at the moment on how to be top performers. I really like the point actually about accountability. I think one of my colleagues was talking to me about the book The Chimp Paradox and how it's always about looking inward first and then looking at your environment and everything else. So no, really resonate with that point. What we thought would be a good point now then is to talk a little bit more about, I suppose, practical applications of sales, and particularly cold calling. Main reason is because on your LinkedIn, actually, the first line of your about you is, "I love being cold called." Feel free to cold call me anytime with your number, actually. So any SDRs who want a lead, there you go. You can cold call David.
Please.
Obviously, I know that there's this massive debate, I'm sure you've come across it, about cold calling being dead at the moment in the modern age of selling, really. What are your thoughts on that?
70% of Cognism's meetings come from cold calls. So there we go. If you want any further proof of it not being dead, then I think that's probably it. Yeah. I love the fact that people think it's dead, because the reason why it's so successful is because nobody cold calls. I've literally got that on my LinkedIn profile, and I have like a small presence in terms of speaking to SDRs on a daily basis, and I probably get cold called I don't know, like maybe on average once a week, absolute max, and I'd say 70% of those are actually recruiters. So great job to recruiters. Yeah, like it's really not. People aren't doing it, but that's why it's so effective, and that's why my team and our company can take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to mention actually, because I think anytime I've cold called someone, I'll ask them, how many times have people cold called you, and it'll honestly be none, or you're the first person. So it's quite an interesting way to actually, stand out, definitely in a market where everyone thinks it's dead. So that's a really good point to hear. And actually, the fact that you've only been cold called once a week when that's on your profile, that's interesting as well. Out of interest then, what's the best cold call you've ever received?
Oh, um, I suppose there's a few. I've had some very bad ones. I've had lots of very bad ones, but I've had a few really good ones. Probably the best one I've ever had was, and I've had a fair few people do this, and I think most of them are now working for us. That people that have cold called me before, they've done their interviews. Some of them don't even know what they're saying. I can tell, right? They've not really formulated a plan. They've just seen my profile and been like, okay, he loves cold calling. I'm just going to cold call him. But it's great. It's a great way to build an instant rapport with me and kind of like make yourself stand out. So that people that have been doing that, or people that have done that, I think that's been really effective. To be, I don't think. I don't think cold calling has to be super complicated. You go in, your job is to display the value of your product or identify a pain, challenge, or goal that the prospect's facing. Explain how your product's gonna help that, and then go from there. So the best ones are the ones that probably aren't super memorable because they've been short, sweet, to the point, and ultimately I've happily taken a meeting from them. And there's been a few people that have done that. So
Nice.
yeah, it's great.
No, good to hear. And I think the fact that people are picking up the phone anyway is always a good sign, really. It immediately makes people stand out, I suppose, the fact that you've had that conversation with them in the first place then. What to you then makes a good cold call?
Exactly that. So you've got to keep it short and sweet, but the key thing is getting into a genuine two-way conversation. That's always going to make the best cold call, and the way that you're going to do that is just by asking really good open-ended questions and be curious and inquisitive about your prospect. I think the bad ones, or unfortunately too often I get cold calls, and I don't blame the individuals that do these cold calls, because it's usually just down to the coaching that they've received from the company. But too often I get individuals that do cold call me, and then they'll just feature dump. They will just kind of go off on a complete tangent on everything about their product, and not ask me any questions before going in there. So I think that's super important. And the second thing is, pretty much always you're going to get an objection. And again, unfortunately, I have individuals that call me and kind of I'll put up like one tiny blocker, and they won't do anything else. They'll be like, oh, okay, fair enough, bye. And you've just got to push through and be persistent. In fact, I've offered a couple of people jobs because they've been so persistent with me. The people that have been, I've desperately been trying to get them off the phone, and they just will not leave. Like I tend to offer them a job. So yeah, it's having that persistence, but also and most importantly, really making it so it's a two-way conversation.
Nice. All right. No, cool. So obviously having that two-way conversation, showing the persistence, and don't fall back off the first hurdle. Really, then what's the best way to handle like a fob off like that? Then because obviously I feel like there's for some people, I suppose there might be that fine line between persistence and then being a little bit too pushy, or really not taking the hint. So how would you kind of define that fine line?
I mean, it comes with experience, I think, more than anything else. But it's reading, it's listening as much to what people are saying, but also the tone and the way that they're saying things, I think is incredibly important, and reacting to that tone. If people, for example, say, "Hey, I'm running into a meeting. I'm super busy," you can usually hear from their tone, like whether they're actually busy or not. For example, and and also you can apply some basic logic that. that if they've picked up the phone, they probably have a little bit of time. But it's really important as a seller to not just ignore that. In that situation, I would just speed up my voice a little bit just to kind of show them that I'm trying to, I am taking into consideration the fact that they've said that they're busy or they're running into a meeting. But yeah, it really depends case by case, I think, and it's going to come with experience. My suggestion for any new SDRs or people doing cold calling is apply a 3 no's rule. So wait until on the 3rd time that they've pushed back, that's when you can end the call, and that's usually a pretty good sound way of looking at things.
Cool. Yeah, good benchmark there. And I guess then to obviously get through the objections and actually have that 2-way conversation, obviously we hear a lot about the first sentence or the first 10 seconds or whatever it is of the call is so important in order to open that door to buy more time to actually speak then. So, I mean, what's out from your, in your opinion, actually, what do you reckon is the best interrupt you've ever heard or used actually yourself?
I actually wrote a post on this the other day, Lizzie. I don't know whether you saw it, yeah. So there's no silver bullet. You've just got to do the one that makes you feel comfortable. So the best anecdote that I can tell is we had one SDR. He was this Aussie guy called Brad. Shout out Brad. I always shout him out when I tell this anecdote. But hopefully he's tuning in. Brad used to start every cold call with, "Hey, this is a cold call." I can't do his accent. I won't even try. But "Hey, this is a cold call. You can hang up now, or do you mind giving me like 10 seconds just to explain why I'm calling?" And he did that every time, and like clockwork, so the prospect would laugh and then give him the 10 seconds that he needed, 10, 20 seconds that he needed. And it was working so well that obviously the rest of the team started adopting it. And the rest of the team were coming to me and they were like, "It's not working for me. Like, I don't get it. Like, it works for Brad so well and it just does not work for me." And the reality was that it was the perfect opener for Brad. Brad was so confident with it. The way he delivered it was like so natural to him that, people really resonated with him with it and made him laugh, he made them laugh. For someone like myself, I'm quite direct. So yeah, my opener was always like, "Hey, do you mind me having 20 seconds just to explain why I'm calling?" And that, to be honest, it wasn't really the words that I'm saying; it's the way that I'm saying it and the confidence that I had saying it that. Again, like that got me into 95% of the conversations, and it wasn't any more complicated than that. So yeah, try. I spoke about this the other day, but I think it's I don't know whether you guys started, when you were trying to work out what your signature should be when you're a kid and you'd sign, and I don't know whether you did this, but like I got a piece of paper out and I did loads of different ones, and then I was like, "Oh, this one feels comfortable," and you keep building from there. So in terms of openers, that's how I do it. But also check out my LinkedIn post because loads of people put their examples in my LinkedIn post, and yeah, just try out, listen to what people are doing, try out what feels comfortable, track which one's working, which one's not, and go from there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that there's not really one set way to do anything. And as you said, it's all about the tone. It's all about personality, what makes you feel comfortable. Because, yeah, you can try different things. It's going to work well or not for different people. So, yeah, I like the flexibility with that. Amazing. And then, obviously, as we kind of talked about earlier, there is this kind of, culture building or hopefully being put away that cold calling is dead and whatnot then. So that can lead to, I suppose, a lot of people being maybe apprehensive to get on the phones or maybe building that culture there. Firstly, I guess one big thing is the research piece. People, don't get on the phones or early enough because maybe they're doing the research or doing loads and loads of prep for a cold call. So in your experience then, how much research do you actually need to do before you just pick up the phone and dial?
I try and set like a rule of like maybe 5 minutes. I mean, it depends. It's going to depend which prospect I'm speaking to. So for example, if I have my list of accounts and there's an account like a massive account that could be really, really high value for the business, then we actually promote that our SDRs are calling like do a bottom-up approach where they're calling the potential end users of our product as a way of like researching into the company and the pains, challenges, goals before they actually call the senior decision makers. So in that sense, like, you know, that might take you a few hours to gather that information, but it's such a high ticket call that you're making. If you're calling, you know, when I first started at Cognism, we were mostly selling to SME companies below 50, and it was really, you know, it kind of really was a volume sell. And so there I would only, you know, for me as an SDR, I actually had an unlimited, essentially an unlimited amount of accounts and an unlimited amount of prospects. As soon as I ran out, I would just ask for some more, and it kind of didn't really make a difference. So with them, I would take a look at their LinkedIn, see if there's anything that I could spot, but literally spend no more than 5 minutes. So there's no right or wrong answer to that one, in my opinion, Lizzie. I think it really depends on, you know, the type of market you're selling into, how big your market is. I'd say if it's just try and recognize whether volume selling is the way forward. In the sense that you just need to rip as many calls as possible and get as many meetings as possible, or whether actually being more strategic and refined is the right tactic for your market. And if so, like, yeah, perhaps you need to do more. And if you do more, I would suggest, you know, call it, you know, doing that bottom up approach and actually researching by speaking to people inside the organization.
Nice. That's good tip, I suppose, there to actually speak to people within the organisation then. And then I guess a couple more on the cold calling piece. It's really interesting hearing your thoughts on it, actually. But what kind of tips can you give to SDRs maybe to stay motivated when hitting the phones? Obviously, you came in with the experience of door to door, and I can imagine that being a relatively tough gig, and then switching that onto the phones then. But obviously, having to call out quite a lot, hear voicemails, get told no, can be pretty demotivating though. So how can you, well, what kind of tips can you give to people to keep it up, really?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I saw everything as a game. I don't know, it seemed really simple to me, but I literally saw every day as a game. And I always say to my team, like, first and foremost, try and break your targets. You know, most people have quarterly, but mostly monthly targets. Try and break them down into daily or weekly targets if your company hasn't done that for you already. So that way, you know, and focus on that particular day, and don't try and not carry any baggage from previous days. And then, yeah, the second thing was I was always a bit of a maths guy. So like I mentioned right at the start of this, and I think the way I looked at things is I knew that if I had 5 conversations, I could probably book 1 demo. And so, and in order to get the 5 conversations, on average, we have like about an 8 to 10% connect rate. So I needed to make 50 to 70 calls to get those 5 conversations to get that 1 meeting. So actually, if I'd made 50 calls and not had 5 conversations and not booked a demo, then I kind of, you know, using the maths brain in me, felt like was even more motivated to make the next call, because I felt like my odds of getting a conversation, therefore a meeting, were just going up and up and up, because I'm just, you know, just playing the maths on it. So that really motivated me. But yeah, I think it's so personal to each individual, and recognizing what, you know, I'm incredibly competitive, so I knew also that, you know, I would have the dashboard that had everybody's call volume right in front of me all day, every day, because I just wanted to beat everybody there. So it's recognizing what your motivators are, and taking a step back and then saying, okay, how can I double down on this? How can I make it so that this, and I think you can apply it to anything, but how can I make it so this job ties perfectly into my motivators?
Nice, perfect. And then the final one on that one, and actually you did do a LinkedIn post about this, but keen to just get your thoughts on the podcast actually. Is there ever a bad time to cold call?
No. No, definitely not. I mean, maybe there is. Yeah, maybe I should be less absolute on this. Maybe there is. In theory, if I'm calling the UK, you know, if I'm calling UK prospects and I'm calling them at 4 a.m., then probably I'm going to book less meetings than if I'm calling them at 4 p.m. Okay, I'm happy to accept that. However, you see a bunch of posts that's like, you know, you've got to call at 8 a.m. That's the best time. Call on Sunday. I saw one that was like, call on Sunday evening. Yeah, I mean, there's all of these tactics. The truth is, as long as you're roughly calling, as long as you think about when your prospect is awake and they're in the mindset of working, as long as they're roughly in that zone, then call them. And the reason you should have that mindset is because if you don't have that mindset and you're obsessed with calling at one particular time of the day, then what it will do is it will stop you having any confidence in calling at the other times in the day. And therefore, actually, your window of opportunity for calling, because of your own mindset, it will become very small. So say, for example, you really believe 8 till 9 is the best time to be calling. That's great. Call at that time. I'm sure you'll do very well. Because of the mindset that you have at that time. But for the rest of the day, like the danger is that then affects it so much that you literally just won't perform as well during any other time. So every time is a good time to call.
Love that, yeah. Every time is a good time to call. Nice. And then mindset is everything. So don't fall into the trap of thinking one time's better than the other. Amazing. And then on that then, I think, yeah, you mentioned LinkedIn quite a fair few bit actually in online posts, and obviously people putting their tips and tricks out there actually. So want to touch on LinkedIn presence actually, because you've, as we've discussed on this call, massively ramped up your online presence. You post really regularly and add a lot of value then. Out of interest, how have you best built up your online presence to be quite, a name in the sales industry?
Yeah, I don't think I'm a name in the sales industry, Lizzie, but I think it's something that I always thought would be of value. I think everybody recognizes that posting online is such an important thing nowadays. I think about midway through last year, the marketing team at Cognism kind of gave me a big push and said they really want me to do it, and that they could help me in certain ways. So, for example, like we post a lot of video content that has come from like webinars that they've put on from and asked me to be a part of, and they'll like cut it down. So I do get a little bit of help in that sense. Yeah, overall, like it's just been fantastic. I think the reason why it's so important that sellers do it is that firstly, it completely validates you as an individual. If you, if you're posting regularly online with any, thoughts that you might have, your buyers hopefully will see that maybe you are interacting with them on LinkedIn, they see you're active on LinkedIn, and they're more likely to trust you. And especially if you have a big following, obviously they're more likely to trust you and engage with you. I think the amount of inbounds, the amount of people that come to me now and say, hey, I've been looking at Cognism is insane. Now, I don't think you can necessarily be a full, I wouldn't say to an SDR, okay, just start posting online and then therefore you're going to get like so many inbounds that actually you never have to make a cold call a day. It should really be like supplementary, and you should think of it in that way. But yeah, I suppose the thing that stopped me before I started posting was just the fear of saying something that was wrong or people wouldn't like or anything like that. I think it's really natural. And what you quickly realize is that pretty much everything you post, there's someone on the internet that will agree or will like it or it will add value. That's the reality. There's so many people out there, and there's also people that will disagree, right? And it won't add any value. So I'd always say throw yourself out there, because people message me all the time. Some of the posts that I think are the worst, they're the ones that people message and go, oh my god, this resonated with me like a ton, can I explore this more? And some of the memes that I've thrown up that have 400 likes or whatever, but have the most engagement, nobody ever messaged me saying anything about them. So just start posting, and but also a word of warning is that don't, and I kind of mentioned it already, but don't make it everything. It's kind of like those cold calls that I mentioned before. Posting on LinkedIn is mostly a volume game at this stage because of the way that the algorithm works. So if you spend 2 hours planning this perfect post, it's probably gonna really eat into like other working times, and you do see that as well. You see people that have built a really big following on LinkedIn that probably aren't performing so well like in their actual role. So you've got to find that balance, and that's really important to me. I always say I said to the marketing team when I said that I was going to start posting more, is like my number one priority is my team, and like doing my day to day and coaching my team. That's way more important to me than anything else. And so on the days that I don't post, it's probably because like I've just been so busy with the work that really matters to me. So for me it's a supplementary thing, but just don't think about it, just do it, because it certainly creates a lot of value.
Nice. Yeah, no, good tips there. And yeah, definitely think about the balance. But obviously, yeah, for people who are maybe hesitant to post out because of what they've said, they're not sure what to say, just posting really, because yeah, it will resonate with someone. I think it's a good tip there. Amazing. So obviously we've asked you loads of questions there, and we're coming up probably towards the end of the episode actually. So just want to finish off with a couple kind of quick fire questions really before we round it off. So first one, actually, you can see you've got a little bookshelf behind you. I've got a few books up there. So actually quite keen to touch on that. I see Atomic.
I've also got a picture of my mum.
Lovely.
I've just realised. Yeah, there we go.
You're blocking out with your head there, but yeah. Just out of interest, we asked quite a few guests on the podcast this actually. But what's one book, if it's behind you, yes or not? But what's one book or maybe podcast that you would recommend salespeople listen to?
This one here, it's Mindset by Caroline Dweck. Is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book on the concept of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and how you really just all of the advantages of having a growth mindset. It's a really easy read, and it's full of great examples, but that genuinely is it. It's so important to me, that book, that we train it in our onboarding. We train the concepts in our onboarding, and we've actually made it part of. We base all of our values as a team, the sales development team, on the teachings of that book. So Mindset by Carol. I think it's Carol Dweck or Caroline Dweck. I can't. This is where one of those. Google it. Mindset.
Amazing. We've got the name. That's the main thing. Great. And then final one. Then obviously this whole series is about changing the perception of sales. We want to make it a career of choice for people who may have not considered it in the past, or people who might have a negative perception. So, in your opinion, David, what can we do to change the perception of sales and make it a career of choice?
I think we just need to be talking about it more, right? And I think it's people like yourselves who are doing these kind of podcasts and creating these resources that people can tune into to talk about it. And I think we need to talk way more about the positives than the negatives. I think personally that especially like tech sales, we know it's such a lucrative and tech sales, recruitment, all of these sales roles in B2B is so unbelievably lucrative if you get it right. I think the people that are making loads of money aren't talking about like how lucrative this role is, almost protect themselves. I think I don't know whether that's some people's mindset, but I really think it is, to be honest, some people's mindset. But yeah, it's fantastic. You make loads of money, and I don't have to pump stuff into Excel all day every day. I just talk to people all the time. So yeah. Nice. Keep doing what you're doing, and that's how we change the perception.
Fantastic. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us on the episode.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. Please subscribe and follow for more. If you like this content, also please check out This Is Prime on all our social media channels, and also Kyle Gallagher and Lizzie Formisano on LinkedIn. See you next time.